The phone screen blurred through Jin's tears. He blinked hard, forced his vision to clear, and stared at the number glowing back at him. $2.14. 7 months pregnant, and his entire world had been reduced to the spare change most people left as tips. His stomach cramped. Not the baby kicking, something sharper, meaner. The kind of pain that came from skipping meals and pretending prenatal vitamins were optional. Jin pressed one hand against the curve of his belly and exhaled slowly through his teeth. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Empty except for half a carton of milk he'd been rationing for 3 days. The lamp beside the couch cast a warm yellow glow across the room, but it couldn't touch the cold creeping through his bones. He was alone, unclaimed, unmarked, a virgin Omega carrying a child no one believed should exist. The clinic had been clear. His suppressant dosage needed adjusting. The prenatal vitamins weren't optional. Stress could trigger early labor. Stress. Jin almost laughed. His phone buzzed with a payment notification. Rent overdue. Again. He swiped it away and opened his messages, thumb hovering over his brother's contact. Hyung had helped before, barely, just enough to make Jin feel like a burden every time he asked. But what choice did he have? The baby needed food. The Omega inside him, the part that still believed in survival, needed help. Jin typed the message 3 times before forcing himself to keep it. Hyung, I'm sorry. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. I need money for supplements and food. Just this once. His chest tightened as he hit send. The shame burned hotter than the hunger. He locked the phone and set it face down on the couch cushion, staring at the ceiling. If he didn't look, maybe the humiliation wouldn't feel so suffocating. Maybe his brother would just understand. Send the money, not ask questions. The phone buzzed. Jin's heart lurched. That was fast. Too fast. He grabbed the phone, relief flooding him for half a second, until he saw the screen. Unknown number. His stomach dropped. No. Jin scrolled up with shaking hands, horror flooding cold and sharp through his veins. Wrong thread. Wrong contact. Wrong person. Oh God, he whispered. His brother's contact was 2 names down. He'd been too panicked, too tired, too desperate to double-check before sending. The unknown number's reply sat there, stark and damning. Who are you? Jin's breath caught. He stared at the message, blood roaring in his ears, fingers trembling so badly he almost dropped the phone. He typed fast, frantic. I'm so sorry. That message wasn't meant for you. Please ignore it. He hit send and immediately locked the screen, pressing the phone against his chest like he could smother the mistake into silence. 3 seconds passed. 5, 10. The phone buzzed again. Jin's hands shook as he unlocked it. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. Jin's breath stuttered. He read it again, slower, trying to understand how a stranger could extract so much from a single desperate text. Another message appeared before he could respond. Why are you begging for money at this hour? The tone was flat, not curious, not kind, controlled. Every instinct Jin had, every Omega survival reflex drilled into him since childhood, screamed at him to stop, to block the number, to pretend this never happened. But humiliation burned hotter than fear. I made a mistake. I didn't mean to involve you. I'll handle it myself. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, you can't. Jin's chest constricted. His pulse hammered against his ribs. Another message followed immediately. What's your name? His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Omega etiquette said never to engage an alpha you didn't know. Especially not one who spoke like this. Calm, commanding, certain. Still, something in the stranger's voice, through text alone, felt immovable. Like refusing would only make things worse. Jin. The reply took longer this time. Long enough that Jin's heart climbed into his throat and stayed there. Then, you contacted me because you're desperate. Jin flinched. And because no one else will help you. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing the tears back. He wouldn't cry. Not over this. Not over a stranger stating facts he already knew. Please, I don't want trouble. The response was immediate. Then stop pretending you're invisible. Jin stared at the screen, breath shallow, fingers numb. His phone buzzed again. This is Chairman Kang Tae-Il. The world tilted. Jin read the name twice, 3 times. His grip on the phone went slack. Chairman Kang, CEO of the Kang Group, rumored mafia ties. An alpha whose scent alone could silence entire boardrooms. Cold, unattached, untouchable. The kind of man who didn't make mistakes. The kind of man Jin should never have texted. His hands shook so badly he could barely type. I didn't know, I swear. Please, I'm sorry. Minutes crawled by. Too long. Jin's stomach cramped again. Harder this time. He curled forward, one hand pressed against his belly, the other still gripping the phone like it might explode. Then, send your address. His heart slammed against his ribs. No, I can't. Another message appeared, slower this time, deliberate. Then we do this my way. Jin stared at the screen until his vision blurred again. Outside, the city hummed, distant sirens, late-night traffic, the occasional shout from the street below. The world kept moving, oblivious to the fact that Jin's life had just shifted off its axis. He didn't send his address, but deep down, Jin knew it didn't matter. Chairman Kang had already decided, and Jin had just become his responsibility. Across the city, Tae-Il sat alone in his office. The blue glow of his phone reflected off glass walls and polished steel. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline stretched dark and glittering. A kingdom of power built on control, precision, and silence. He had been reviewing quarterly financials when the message arrived. Young, I'm sorry. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. I need money for supplements and food. Just this once. Tae-Il had read it twice before responding. Raw, unfiltered, desperate. The kind of message that should have been deleted immediately. But something about it caught him. Not the plea itself. He received hundreds of those, filtered through assistants and legal teams. People begging for mercy, for money, for second chances they hadn't earned. This was different. The message hadn't been crafted. It hadn't been rehearsed. It was a mistake. Honest, humiliating, and completely unintended. An Omega who hadn't learned how to beg properly. Tae-Il leaned back in his chair, phone in hand, and watched the conversation unfold. Who are you? The Omega's panic had been immediate, apologetic, frantic. I'm so sorry. That message wasn't meant for you. Please ignore it. Tae-Il's jaw tightened. Ignore it, as if desperation could be dismissed with an apology. He'd seen this before. Omegas discarded by the system, ground down until they believed invisibility was survival. Pregnant, unprotected, unclaimed. The kind of liability the world disposed of quietly. Tae-Il exhaled through his nose and typed again. You're pregnant. A statement, not a question. The Omega's response confirmed everything. Why are you begging for money at this hour? Silence stretched for 30 seconds. Long enough that Tae-Il almost set the phone down. Then, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to involve you. I'll handle it myself. Tae-Il's eyes narrowed. Handle it. Alone. Starving. 7 months pregnant and too proud to ask the right way. You can't. He watched the 3 dots appear and disappear on the screen. The Omega was panicking now, trying to find the right words, the safe words. There were none. Tae-Il typed slowly, deliberately. What's your name? The answer came after a long pause. Jin. Tae-Il repeated it silently. Short, soft, the kind of name that didn't demand attention. Perfect for someone who'd learned to disappear. He typed again. You contacted me because you're desperate, and because no one else will help you. The screen stayed blank for nearly a minute. Tae-Il imagined the Omega staring at his phone, shaking, trying to decide whether to respond or run. Finally, please, I don't want trouble. Tae-Il almost smiled. Too late for that. Then stop pretending you're invisible. He sent his name next. Let the weight of it settle. This is Chairman Kang Tae-Il. Tae-Il set the phone on his desk and stood, crossing to the window. Below, the city sprawled, neon signs, traffic lights, countless lives moving through the dark without ever intersecting. Until tonight, his phone buzzed. I didn't know, I swear. Please, I'm sorry. Tae-Il picked it up, expression unreadable. An apology wouldn't fix this. Neither would distance. Send your address. The Omega refused, predictably. No, I can't. Tae-Il's thumb hovered over the keyboard. He could walk away, delete the thread, forget the entire interaction. But the message had already been sent. The desperation had already been laid bare. And Tae-Il had never been good at ignoring problems that shouldn't exist. He typed one final message. Then we do this my way. He didn't wait for a reply. Tae-Il pulled up his contacts, selected a number he rarely used, and made a single call. Find me an address, he said quietly. Male Omega, first name Jean. Sent a text to this number approximately 40 minutes ago. The voice on the other end didn't ask questions. Understood, Chairman. 10 minutes. Tae-Il ended the call and returned to the window. Somewhere out there, Jean was panicking, cursing himself, trying to convince himself this would blow over. It wouldn't. Tae-Il had decided the moment he read that first message. Raw, desperate, and completely unguarded. The Omega had asked for help. Now he was going to get it, whether he wanted it or not. The knock came at 3:17 a.m. Firm, controlled, not rushed. Jean nearly fell off the couch. He'd been staring at his phone for the last 2 hours, watching the screen like it might explode. No new messages, no follow-up from Chairman Kang. Just silence, thick, suffocating, worse than any threat. And now someone was at his door. Another knock. Jin's heart slammed against his ribs. He pressed one hand against his stomach, the other gripping the couch cushion so tightly his knuckles went white. Couldn't be him. Couldn't. Jean. His knees buckled. The voice was deep, calm, and absolutely certain. Not a question, not a request, a confirmation. Jean forced himself to stand, legs trembling, breath shallow. He crossed the small living room in 4 unsteady steps and stared at the door like it might bite him. Jean, the voice repeated. Open the door. His hand shook as he reached for the lock. Every instinct screamed at him to stop. Don't open it, don't engage, don't let the stranger inside. But Chairman Kang had already crossed every line. What difference would one more make? Jean unlocked the door and pulled it open. Chairman Kang filled the doorway. Tall, immaculately dressed in a black suit that looked like it cost more than Jin's rent for the year. Dark eyes that didn't blink, didn't soften, didn't waver. The hallway light framed him like a portrait of controlled power. His gaze dropped immediately to Jin's stomach, then back to his face. You shouldn't be living like this, Tae-Il said. It wasn't judgment. It was fact. Jin's throat tightened. I didn't ask you to come. No, Tae-Il agreed, stepping inside without waiting for permission. You asked for help. The room felt smaller instantly. Tae-Il moved with the kind of certainty that didn't require invitation, like the space had already been claimed the moment he decided to enter it. He glanced around once, taking in everything. The empty fridge with its door slightly ajar, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the thin blankets folded too neatly on the couch. Jean stood frozen by the door, one hand still gripping the handle. You can close that, Tae-Il said without looking at him. Jean did, slowly, and turned to face the alpha. Tae-Il removed his coat with practiced ease, draping it over the back of a chair. Beneath it, his shirt was crisp, perfectly tailored. He looked like he'd stepped out of a boardroom, not like someone who'd driven across the city at 3 in the morning to check on a stranger. I don't want charity, Jean said quietly. Tae-Il's gaze shifted to him. Good, neither do I. Their eyes met. Jin's pulse hammered. He wanted to look away. Every Omega instinct told him to lower his gaze, to submit, to stop challenging an alpha whose presence alone made the air feel heavier. But he didn't. Tae-Il's expression didn't change. He studied Jean for a long moment, then nodded once, like Jean had passed some invisible test. "You don't walk away from this," Tae-Il said. "Not yet." Jin's hands trembled. "Why?" The question came out smaller than he intended. Tae-Il's gaze softened, just barely. "Because you and that child are leverage. And because someone failed you." Silence stretched between them. Jin's throat burned. He wanted to argue, to demand answers, to throw the alpha out and pretend this nightmare would end. But deep down, he knew the truth. No one was coming to save him, except, apparently, the one person he'd texted by accident. "There will be 3 conditions," Tae-Il said. Jean stiffened. "Conditions?" "Round 1, Tae-Il clarified. "You accept my protection. Publicly." Jin's heart skipped. "People will talk. They already are." Jean flinched. Tae-Il stepped closer. Not touching, but close enough that Jean could feel the weight of his presence. The scent hit him then. Cold rain? Smoke. Something sharp and clean that made his Omega instincts curl inward. "Round 2, Tae-Il continued. "You stop pretending you're weak. You come with me when I summon you. You listen." Jin's throat tightened. "And the 3rd, Tae-Il's gaze held his. "You don't disappear," he said quietly. "Not after tonight." Jin's breath shook. Outside, the city slept, unaware that one wrong text had just shifted the balance of power. And that the coldest alpha in the city had decided to claim responsibility for an Omega the world had already thrown away. Tae-Il pulled his phone from his pocket and made a single call. "Deliver groceries to this address. Enough for 2 weeks. Include prenatal vitamins, prescription grade." He paused. "And have a car ready at 9 a.m. Jean stared. "What are you doing?" Tae-Il ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Round 1 starts now." The groceries arrived at 6:47 a.m. Jean woke to the sound of someone knocking. Not harshly, but insistently. He sat up on the couch, disoriented. One hand pressed against his stomach as the baby kicked. Chairman Kang was gone. The coat was still draped over the chair. A business card sat on the counter beside a glass of water Jean didn't remember pouring. Kang Tae-Il, Chairman, Kang Group, private line, number. Jean stared at it, heart pounding. The knocking continued. He crossed to the door and opened it to find 2 young men in crisp uniforms holding boxes. Multiple boxes, stacked so high Jean could barely see their faces. "Delivery for Jean," one of them said politely. Jean blinked. "I didn't order." Courtesy of Chairman Kang. They didn't wait for permission. They carried the boxes inside, setting them carefully on the counter, the table, even the floor. Fresh vegetables, rice, meat, milk, eggs, prenatal vitamins in a sealed pharmacy bag. Enough food to last a month. Jin's chest tightened. One of the delivery men handed him a small envelope. "Chairman Kang asked us to give you this." Jean took it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in sharp, precise strokes. "Eat, rest. I'll return at 9. The delivery men left without another word. Jean stood in the middle of his apartment, surrounded by more food than he'd seen in months, and felt something crack inside his chest. He sank onto the couch and pressed both hands against his face. He should feel grateful. He should feel relieved. Instead, he felt exposed. By 8:30 a.m., the neighbors had noticed. Jean heard them through the thin walls. Muffled voices, whispers, the kind of speculation that always followed Omegas who didn't fit the mold. "Did you see the car outside? Who's helping him? You think he finally found an alpha?" Jean closed his eyes and breathed slowly through his nose. "Let them talk." At exactly 9 a.m., another knock. This time, Jean knew who it was before he opened the door. Chairman Kang stood in the hallway, dressed in another immaculate suit. Charcoal gray this time, with a black tie that looked like it had been tied with surgical precision. His expression was unreadable. "You ate," he said. Not a question. Jean nodded. Tae-Il's gaze dropped briefly to his stomach, then back to his face. "Good. Get your coat." "Where are we going?" "Clinic," Tae-Il said. "Your suppressants need adjusting." You're 7 months along. Skipping prenatal appointments isn't optional. Jin's throat tightened. I can't afford. You're not paying. Jin stared at him. Tae-Il's expression didn't change. Round 1, Jin. Public protection. That includes medical care. Jin wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to tell the alpha that this was too much, too fast, too visible. But the baby kicked again. Sharp, insistent, and Jin's resolve crumbled. Fine, he whispered. Tae-Il nodded once. Let's go. The clinic was upscale. Too upscale. The kind of place Jin had never been able to afford. Glass walls, soft lighting, receptionists who smiled like they meant it. Tae-Il walked in like he owned the building, and maybe he did. The staff recognized him immediately. Chairman Kang, the receptionist said, standing. We weren't expecting you. Emergency appointment, Tae-Il said. Prenatal care. Priority. Of course. Right this way. Jin followed, numb, hyper-aware of every eye that tracked their movement. Other patients in the waiting room stared. Some curious, some envious, some confused. An unmated omega, a powerful alpha. The rumors would start before they even left the building. The appointment was thorough. Blood work, ultrasound, vitamin adjustments. The doctor spoke directly to Tae-Il more than once, as if Jin wasn't even there. The baby's healthy, the doctor said, but he's malnourished. Stress levels are elevated. He needs rest, proper nutrition, and reduced anxiety. Tae-Il's jaw tightened. He'll have it. Jin sat on the examination table, staring at the ultrasound screen where his baby's heartbeat flickered. Strong, steady, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding them. Tae-Il stepped closer, gaze fixed on the screen. For the first time since they'd met, his expression softened. Just barely. Jin looked away. By the time they left the clinic, the whispers had already started. Jin felt them like static electricity, charged, unavoidable, clinging to his skin. Tae-Il opened the car door for him without a word. Jin slid inside, and the alpha followed, settling into the seat beside him with the same controlled ease he did everything else. The driver pulled away from the curb. They're talking about me, Jin said quietly. Yes. Jin's hands curled into fists. You said public protection. You didn't say it would feel like this. Tae-Il turned to look at him. What did you think protection looked like? Jin didn't answer. They'll talk, Tae-Il continued. They'll speculate. They'll assume things about you that aren't true. He paused. But they won't touch you. Jin's chest tightened. That's round 1, Tae-Il said. Visibility. The world doesn't respect what it can't see. Jin stared out the window, throat burning. He wanted to hate this. He wanted to resent the alpha for dragging him into the light. But the baby kicked again, gentle, content. And Jin realized something that made his stomach twist. For the first time in months, he felt safe, even if it came at the cost of being seen. 3 days passed. Jin tried to settle into the strange new rhythm of his life. Groceries delivered every other day, medical check-ins scheduled without his input, text messages from Chairman Kang that were more commands than questions. Eat breakfast, rest for 2 hours. Doctor's appointment at 3 p.m. car will arrive at 2:45. Jin didn't argue, partly because he didn't have the energy, partly because, despite everything, it was working. His stomach didn't cramp anymore. The baby kicked more frequently, playful, not distressed. Jin had gained 2 pounds in 3 days, and the dark circles under his eyes had started to fade. But the whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd gotten worse. Jin heard them every time he left the apartment. Neighbors in the stairwell, strangers at the clinic, even the delivery drivers who brought his groceries. That's the Omega Chairman Kang's protecting. Do you think he's the father? No way. Kang doesn't do relationships. Then what's he doing? Jin kept his head down and ignored them until the text arrived. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. formal. Car will pick you up at 6:30. Jin stared at the message, heart sinking. He typed back immediately. I can't. 3 dots appeared. Round 2, Jin. Jin's jaw tightened. You said I had to listen. You didn't say I had to perform. The reply came faster than expected. This isn't performance. This is survival. Dress appropriately. Don't be late. Jin wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, he set it down carefully and pressed both hands against his face. The car arrived at exactly 6:30. Jin wore the only formal outfit he owned. A simple black shirt and slacks that barely fit over his swollen stomach. He felt ridiculous, exposed, like a child playing dress-up. The driver didn't speak during the ride. They pulled up outside a restaurant Jin had only seen in magazines. Glass walls, valet parking, a line of expensive cars waiting at the curb. Jin's stomach twisted. I can't do this, he whispered. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Chairman Kang is waiting inside. Jin closed his eyes, exhaled slowly, and opened the car door. The hostess recognized him immediately. Mr. Jin, she said warmly. Right this way. She led him through the restaurant, past tables filled with powerful people in tailored suits and glittering jewelry. Jin felt every eye on him, tracking his movement, dissecting his appearance. Pregnant, unmarked, unclaimed. The hostess stopped at a private table near the back. Chairman Kang sat alone, dressed impeccably in a dark suit, one hand resting on the stem of a wine glass. He looked up as Jin approached, gaze steady. Sit, he said. It wasn't a request. Jin sat. The hostess disappeared. Silence stretched between them. Tae-Il set down his glass. You're angry. I'm humiliated, Jin corrected. Tae-Il's expression didn't change. Why? Because you dragged me here, Jin said, voice low, in front of all these people, so they can stare and whisper and decide what I am. They've already decided, Tae-Il said calmly. The question is whether you care. Jin's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Tae-Il leaned forward slightly. Round 2 isn't about control, Jin. It's about visibility. The world only respects what it can see. Right now, they see you as weak, disposable. Jin flinched. By the end of tonight, Tae-Il continued, they'll see you as mine. Jin's breath caught. Tae-Il's gaze didn't waver. That's not a claim. It's not a bond. It's a shield. He paused. And you need it. Jin stared at him, throat tight. Before he could respond, a man approached their table. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of swagger that announced his alpha status before he even opened his mouth. Chairman Kang, the man said, grinning. Didn't expect to see you here. His gaze shifted to Jin, lingering too long on his stomach. And with company. Tae-Il's expression remained neutral. Mr. Choi. Choi's grin widened. Who's your friend? None of your concern, Tae-Il said evenly. Choi laughed. Come on. You can't bring a pregnant Omega to a place like this and not expect questions. Jin's hands trembled. Tae-Il set down his glass with deliberate care. You're right. I can't. He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. Which is why I'll make it clear. He stepped around the table, positioning himself between Jin and Choi. Jin is under my protection, Tae-Il said, voice low and precise. Anyone who disrespects him disrespects me. He paused. Do we have an understanding? Choi's grin faltered. I didn't mean. Yes, Tae-Il interrupted. You did. The tension crackled. Choi raised both hands in mock surrender. Understood, Chairman. My apologies. He left quickly. Tae-Il returned to his seat, expression unchanged. Jin stared at him, heart pounding. That's round 2, Tae-Il said quietly. Visibility, authority, consequences. Jin's throat burned. For the first time, he realized something he hadn't wanted to admit. Chairman Kang wasn't just protecting him. He was claiming space for him in a world that had spent months pretending Jin didn't exist. And Jin wasn't sure if that terrified him or gave him hope. The photo appeared 3 days later. Jin was folding laundry, one of the few tasks that still felt normal, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, expecting another terse instruction from Chairman Kang. Instead, he saw a message from an unknown number and a photo. Jin's hands went numb. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Jin at 17, thinner, younger, standing beside a man whose face had been deliberately blurred. The timestamp read 3 years ago. Below it, a single line of text. "Does Chairman Kang know what you really are?" Jin dropped the phone. It clattered against the floor, screen up, the photo still glowing accusingly. His chest constricted, breath coming in short, sharp gasps that didn't reach his lungs. No, not now. Not when things were finally. His phone buzzed again. "You thought you could hide. You thought no one would remember." Jin sank onto the couch, one hand pressed against his stomach. The baby kicked, oblivious to the panic flooding through him. Another message. "Meet me tomorrow, alone, or everyone learns the truth." Jin's vision blurred. He knew this voice, not the number, but the tone. Cold, calculated, the kind of cruelty that waited years for the perfect moment to strike. His phone rang. Chairman Kang's name flashed across the screen. Jin stared at it, hand shaking, unable to move. The ringing stopped. 30 seconds later, another text. "Jin, answer." He couldn't. If Tae-Il found out, if he learned what Jin had been, what had happened 3 years ago, why he'd been abandoned, the protection would disappear. The safety would evaporate. Jin would be alone again. His phone rang a second time. This time, Jin forced himself to answer. "Hello," he whispered. "You didn't respond to my last 3 messages." Tae-Il's voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. "What's wrong?" Jin's throat closed. "Nothing. I'm fine." Silence stretched on the other end. "You're lying," Tae-Il said evenly. Jin closed his eyes. I need some space. Please." "No." Jin's breath hitched. "What?" "You don't get space when something's wrong," Tae-Il continued. "You get help. That's how this works." Jin's chest tightened. "I didn't agree to this." "You did," Tae-Il said. "The moment you accepted round 1. Pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't." The line went dead. Jin sat frozen, phone clutched in his hand, staring at the photo still glowing on the screen. 20 minutes. He had 20 minutes to decide whether to tell the truth or let Chairman Kang walk into a trap he didn't know existed. Tae-Il arrived in 18. The knock was familiar now, controlled, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Jin opened the door before the alpha could knock again. Tae-Il stood in the hallway, dressed more casually than usual. No suit jacket, just a black shirt and slacks. But his expression was anything but relaxed. His gaze swept over Jin once, cataloging every detail. "What happened?" Jin stepped aside, letting him in. Tae-Il closed the door behind him and turned, waiting. Jin's hands trembled as he picked up his phone from the couch and handed it over without a word. Tae-Il took it, eyes narrowing as he read the messages. His jaw tightened with each line. When he reached the photo, he went completely still. Silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. "Who is this?" Tae-Il asked quietly. Jin's voice cracked. "Someone from before." "Before what?" Jin wrapped both arms around his stomach, unable to meet the alpha's gaze. "Before I disappeared. Before I was..." He swallowed hard. "Before I was thrown away." Tae-Il's expression didn't change. "Explain." Jin forced himself to breathe. 3 years ago, I was involved with someone, an alpha from a powerful family. I thought, his voice broke. I thought he cared. But when I got pregnant, he said it was impossible, that I was lying, that I was trying to trap him. Tae-Il's eyes darkened. He paid people to discredit me, Jin continued, voice shaking. Spread rumors, made sure no one would hire me, no one would believe me. He pressed one hand against his mouth. I lost everything, my job, my reputation. Even my family stopped talking to me. And the pregnancy? Tae-Il asked, voice dangerously calm. Jin's throat burned. He claimed it couldn't be his, said I must have been with someone else. But I hadn't, I was a virgin when we met. The baby shouldn't exist, but it does, and no one believed me. Tae-Il set the phone down carefully on the counter. What's his name? It doesn't matter, Jean whispered. It does. Jean looked up, finally meeting the alpha's gaze. Why? So you can make it worse? So you can. So I can end it, Tae-Il interrupted. Jin's breath caught. Tae-Il stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that Jean could feel the heat radiating from him. You think I brought you into the light to let someone drag you back into the dark? Jin's eyes burned. You didn't know. I know now, Tae-Il said, and that changes nothing about round 1 or round 2. His gaze held Jin's. But it does change round 3. Jin's heart hammered. What's round 3? Tae-Il's expression was unreadable. Justice. The response came at midnight. Jean had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from hours of Tae-Il making phone calls in the other room. Low, clipped conversations Jean couldn't fully hear. He woke to the sound of his phone buzzing. Another message from the unknown number. You told him. Stupid mistake. Jin's stomach twisted. Tomorrow, noon, the cafe on 4th Street. Come alone or I release everything. Jean stared at the screen, pulse racing. A hand settled on his shoulder. He nearly jumped out of his skin. Tae-Il stood behind the couch, fully dressed despite the late hour. Let me see it. Jean handed over the phone wordlessly. Tae-Il read the message once, then handed it back. You're not going. I have to, Jean whispered. If I don't. If you do, Tae-Il interrupted. You play into exactly what they want. Fear, isolation, control. Jin's hands shook. Then what do I do? Tae-Il pulled out his own phone and typed something quickly. You let me handle round 3. I don't want you to. This isn't about what you want, Tae-Il said, voice firm but not unkind. This is about what you deserve. He paused. And you deserve better than being blackmailed by someone who destroyed you once already. Jin's throat tightened. Tae-Il's gaze softened, just barely. Trust me. And despite every instinct screaming at Jean to refuse, to protect himself, to run, he nodded. The cafe was crowded. Jean sat at a corner table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea he hadn't touched, watching the door like it might explode. Chairman Kang sat across from him, perfectly calm, scrolling through his phone as if they were on a casual lunch date. He's late, Jean whispered. He's watching, Tae-Il corrected without looking up. Jin's stomach twisted. How do you know? Because that's what predators do. Tae-Il set his phone down and finally met Jin's gaze. They test. They wait. They look for weakness. I am weak, Jean said quietly. Tae-Il's expression didn't change. No, you're scared. There's a difference. Jean looked away. The bell above the cafe door chimed. A man entered, tall, expensively dressed, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers. Handsome in a way that felt practiced, calculated. Jin's breath stopped. Park Min-jae, the alpha who'd destroyed him. Min-jae's gaze swept the cafe, landing on their table. His expression shifted. Surprise, then amusement, then something colder. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets, smile sharp. Jean, he said warmly, as if they were old friends. It's been a while. Jean couldn't speak. Min-jae's gaze shifted to Tae-Il. And you must be Chairman Kang. I've heard a lot about you. Tae-Il didn't stand, didn't smile. Sit. It wasn't an invitation. Min-jae's smile faltered, but he pulled out a chair and sat. I have to say, I'm impressed. Jean managed to find someone even more powerful than me. You're not powerful, Tae-Il said evenly. You're a coward who preys on people who can't fight back. Min-jae's jaw tightened. Careful, Chairman. You don't know the full story. I know enough. Min-jae leaned back, crossing his arms. Then you know Jin's pregnancy is complicated. That there are questions about who the father really is. Jean flinched. Tae-Il's gaze didn't waver. The only question is why you're still breathing after what you did. The air in the cafe shifted. Min-jae's smile vanished. Threatening me won't change the facts. Jean got pregnant under suspicious circumstances. I had every right to protect my reputation. By destroying his, Tae-Il said. By telling the truth, Min-jae corrected. That he's unstable. That he manipulated me. That he… Stop! The word cut through the air like a blade. Tae-Il stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. You're done. Min-jae blinked. Excuse me? Your company's largest investor just pulled out, Tae-Il said calmly. Your family's assets are being audited, and every person you paid to spread rumors about Jean. They're being contacted by my legal team. Min-jae's face went pale. You can't. I already did, Tae-Il interrupted. You wanted to meet. You wanted to threaten. You wanted control. He paused. You have none. Min-jae stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You think you can ruin me? My family has more power than you realize. Had, Tae-Il corrected. Past tense. Min-jae's hands curled into fists. Tae-Il stepped between him and Jean, voice dropping. If you come near him again, if you contact him, if you speak his name, if you so much as think about him, I will make sure there's nothing left of your life to salvage. Min-jae's jaw worked. This isn't over. Yes, Tae-Il said quietly. It is. He gestured toward the door. Leave. Min-jae stared at him, fury and fear warring in his expression. Then he turned and walked out. The bell chimed behind him. Silence settled over the cafe. Jean sat frozen, hands shaking, unable to process what had just happened. Tae-Il returned to his seat, expression unchanged. Round 3. Jin's voice cracked. What? Round 3, Tae-Il repeated. You don't fight alone. Not anymore. Jin's vision blurred. Why are you doing this? Tae-Il's gaze softened. Because someone should have done it 3 years ago. Jean pressed both hands against his face, breath hitching. For the first time in years, the weight pressing down on his chest lifted. Just slightly, just enough to breathe. That night, Jean woke to the baby kicking. Not distressed, not frantic, playful. He sat up on the couch, one hand pressed against his stomach, and felt the tiny movements beneath his palm. The apartment was quiet. Tae-Il had left hours ago, promising to return in the morning. Jin's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He picked it up, expecting another message, another threat. Another, sleep, you're safe. Jean stared at the text, throat tight. He typed back slowly. How do you know I'm awake? The reply came immediately. Because I know you. Jin's chest ached. Another message followed. Rest, Jean. Tomorrow starts round 3 properly. Jean set the phone down and lay back against the couch cushions. Outside, the city hummed, distant and indifferent. But inside the small apartment, Jean felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. The attack came on a Thursday. Jean had just finished breakfast when the knock came. Not the controlled knock he'd learned to recognize, but something harsher, urgent. He opened the door cautiously. 2 men stood in the hallway, not delivery drivers, not neighbors. Their expressions were cold, professional. Jean? One of them asked. Jin's instincts screamed. He tried to close the door. The man's foot blocked it. We just want to talk, the man said, pushing inside. Jean stumbled back, one hand instinctively moving to protect his stomach. Get out. Can't do that, the second man said, closing the door behind them. We have a message from Park Min-jae. Jin's blood went cold. The first man pulled out his phone, showing Jean a photo. He wants you to know that Chairman Kang's protection doesn't mean much when you're alone. Jin's breath came in short gasps. I'm not alone. Looks like you are to me, the second man said, stepping closer. Jean backed toward the kitchen, heart pounding, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. The baby kicked hard, frantic. Easy, the first man said, raising both hands. We're not here to hurt you, just to remind you that silence is cheaper than lawyers. Jin's hands shook. Get out, the second man smiled. Or what? You'll call your alpha protector? By the time he gets here, the door slammed open. Tae-Il filled the doorway, expression colder than Jean had ever seen. Behind him, 2 security guards blocked the hallway. The room went silent. Hands where I can see them, Tae-Il said quietly. The 2 men froze. Chairman Kang, the first man said quickly. We were just threatening a pregnant Omega in his own home, Tae-Il finished. He stepped inside, gaze never leaving them. Do you know what happens to people who threaten what's mine? The second man paled. We didn't touch him. You entered without permission, Tae-Il interrupted. You cornered him. You scared him. His voice dropped. That's enough. He gestured to the security guards. Take them. The guards moved efficiently, restraining both men without resistance. Wait, the first man tried. Tae-Il ignored him, crossing to Jean. Are you hurt? Jean shook his head, unable to speak. Tae-Il's gaze swept over him once, checking for injuries, then softened fractionally. Sit. Jin's legs gave out. He sank onto the couch, both hands pressed against his stomach. Tae-Il turned back to the 2 men. Tell Park Min-jae that if he sends anyone else, I won't be as forgiving. The first man swallowed hard. Understood. The security guards dragged them out. The door closed. Silence settled over the apartment. Tae-Il crossed to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and brought it to Jean. Drink. Jean took it with shaking hands. Tae-Il sat beside him, not touching, but close enough that Jean could feel his presence. How did you know? Jean whispered. Security cameras, Tae-Il said. I had them installed yesterday. The moment they entered the building, I was notified. Jin's chest tightened. You've been watching me. I've been protecting you, Tae-Il corrected. There's a difference. Jean set the glass down, hands still trembling. This is my fault. If I hadn't. Stop, Tae-Il said firmly. This is Park Min-jae's fault, not yours. Jin's throat burned. He won't stop. Yes, Tae-Il agreed. He will. Jean looked up, meeting the alpha's gaze. Because I'm done playing defensively, Tae-Il continued. He wants a war? He'll get one. Jin's breath hitched. I don't want you to. This isn't about what you want, Tae-Il said. This is about what's right. He paused. And what's right is making sure he never threatens you again. Jean stared at him, vision blurring. Tae-Il's expression softened. You're not alone anymore, Jean. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this gets. Jin's hands curled into fists. I don't know how. Then learn, Tae-Il said quietly. The retaliation was swift. By evening, Park Min-jae's company had collapsed. Investors pulled out. Contracts were canceled. Board members resigned. The media picked up the story: corruption, fraud, embezzlement. None of it mentioned Jean. Tae-Il had made sure of that. Jean watched the news from his couch, phone in hand, unable to look away from the headlines scrolling across the screen. Park Group in crisis. CEO under investigation. His phone buzzed. A message from Tae-Il. It's over. He can't touch you. Jean stared at the screen, chest tight. Another message followed. Rest. I'll see you tomorrow. Jean set the phone down and pressed both hands against his face. The baby kicked, gentle, calm. Outside, the city continued. And for the first time in 3 years, Jean realized something that made his throat ache. Justice wasn't just a concept. It was real, and it had come for him. The press conference was Tae-Il's idea. Jean had refused 3 times before finally agreeing. I don't want to be in the spotlight, Jean had said. You're already in it, Tae-Il had replied. The question is whether you control the narrative or let someone else do it for you. So Jean stood backstage at the Kang Group headquarters, one hand pressed against his stomach, the other gripping a glass of water he couldn't bring himself to drink. Tae-Il stood beside him, adjusting his cuffs with the same calm precision he did everything else. You don't have to say anything, Tae-Il said. I'll handle the questions. Jean swallowed hard. Then why am I here? Tae-Il looked at him. Because they need to see you're real, that you're not hiding, that you're not ashamed. Jin's throat tightened. But I am. Then fake it, Tae-Il said quietly. Just for an hour. Jin wanted to argue, wanted to run, wanted to disappear back into the safety of his apartment where no one could see him. But the baby kicked, strong, insistent, and Jin forced himself to breathe. Okay, he whispered. Tae-Il nodded once. Let's go. The conference room was packed. Reporters lined the walls, cameras flashing, voices overlapping in a chaotic rush of questions. Tae-Il walked to the podium with the kind of authority that silenced the room instantly. Jin stood to the side, hands clasped in front of him, trying to make himself invisible. Thank you for coming, Tae-Il began. I'll keep this brief. He paused, gaze sweeping the room. 3 years ago, a young Omega named Jin was abandoned by someone he trusted. He was blackmailed, blacklisted, and left to survive alone while pregnant. Tae-Il's voice was calm, precise. That person was Park Min-jae. The room erupted in murmurs. Tae-Il didn't flinch. Park Min-jae used his family's power to destroy Jin's reputation, claiming the pregnancy was fabricated. He spread lies, paid people to discredit him, and ensured Jin had no recourse. A reporter raised her hand. Chairman Kang, why are you involved in this? Tae-Il's gaze shifted to her. Because someone should have been involved 3 years ago. He paused. Jin contacted me by mistake. A wrong number. A desperate plea for help. His voice dropped. And I decided that desperation deserved an answer. Another reporter spoke up. Are you claiming responsibility for the child? No, Tae-Il said firmly. I'm claiming responsibility for Jin's safety, for his dignity, for ensuring he's treated with the respect every person deserves. Jin's chest ached. The child is Jin's, Tae-Il continued. The biological details are irrelevant. What matters is that he was abandoned when he needed support most. And that ends now. A third reporter called out. What about Park Min-jae's allegations that Jin manipulated him? Tae-Il's expression hardened. Park Min-jae is a coward who destroyed an innocent person to protect his reputation. His allegations are lies. And anyone who perpetuates them will answer to me. The room fell silent. Tae-Il stepped back from the podium and gestured to Jin. If you have questions for Jin, ask them respectfully. Otherwise, this conference is over. Jin's heart slammed against his ribs. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Jin, why did you wait 3 years to come forward? Jin's voice shook. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me. And now? Another reporter asked. Jin looked at Tae-Il, then back at the room. Now I have someone who does. The silence stretched, thick, heavy. Then a reporter in the back called out. What do you want people to know? Jin's hands trembled. That I didn't ask for this. That I didn't want to be a burden. But, his voice cracked. But I'm not ashamed anymore. The room erupted in flashes and questions. Tae-Il stepped forward, placing himself between Jin and the crowd. That's enough. Thank you. He guided Jin off the stage, hand resting lightly on his back. Backstage, Jin collapsed into a chair, breath coming in short gasps. Tae-Il knelt in front of him. Breathe. Jin pressed both hands against his face. I can't believe I just... You were perfect, Tae-Il said. Jin looked up, vision blurred. They're going to tear me apart. No, Tae-Il said firmly. They're going to see you. He paused. And that's the point. Jin's throat burned. Tae-Il stood, offering his hand. Come on. Let's go home. Jin took it, letting the alpha pull him to his feet. And for the first time in 3 years, the word home didn't feel like a lie. 2 weeks later, Jin woke to sunlight. Real sunlight. Not the harsh fluorescent glow of his old apartment, but warm golden light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. He sat up slowly, one hand pressed against his stomach, and looked around the bedroom Tae-Il had insisted he use. Spacious, clean, safe. The baby kicked, playful, content. Jin smiled. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Breakfast is ready. Don't make me come get you. Jin's chest warmed. He dressed slowly, pulling on clothes that actually fit now, and made his way to the kitchen. Tae-Il stood at the stove, cooking eggs with the same focused precision he applied to everything else. He glanced up as Jin entered. You slept late, Tae-Il observed. I was tired, Jin said, sliding into a chair at the counter. Tae-Il set a plate in front of him, eggs, toast, fruit. Eat. Jin picked up his fork. You don't have to do this. I know, Tae-Il said, pouring himself coffee. I'm doing it anyway. Jin ate in silence, hyper-aware of the alpha's presence. The media coverage has shifted, Tae-Il said after a moment. Public opinion is in your favor. Jin set down his fork. And Park Min-jae? Bankrupt, Tae-Il said, facing multiple lawsuits. His family disowned him. He paused. He's no longer a threat. Jin's throat tightened. Thank you. Tae-Il's gaze softened. You don't have to thank me. Yes, Jin said quietly. I do. They sat in comfortable silence. Finally, Jin spoke. What happens now? Tae-Il looked at him. That depends on you. Jin's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Round 1 was protection, Tae-Il said. Round 2 was visibility. Round 3 was justice. He paused. What comes next is your choice. Jin stared at him. My choice. You can stay here, Tae-Il continued. You can leave. You can decide what kind of life you want. His gaze held Jin's. But whatever you choose, you're not alone. Jin's chest ached. Why are you doing this? Tae-Il was quiet for a long moment. Because I know what it's like to be thrown away, he said finally. And I decided a long time ago that if I ever had the power to stop it from happening to someone else, I would. Jin's vision blurred. Tae-Il stood, crossing to the window. You asked me once why I cared. The answer is simple. He turned back to Jin. Because you deserved better than what the world gave you. Jin pressed both hands against his face, shoulders shaking. Tae-Il didn't move, didn't speak. Just let Jin cry. Ugly, messy, cathartic. When Jin finally looked up, Tae-Il was still there. I want to stay, Jin whispered. Tae-Il's expression didn't change. Then stay. But not because I need you, Jin continued, voice shaking. Because I choose you. Tae-Il's gaze softened. Good. Jin wiped his eyes, breath steadying. What about the baby? What about them? Tae-Il asked. You're not. I mean, you didn't. I know, Tae-Il said. And it doesn't matter. He paused. They're yours. That's enough. Jin's throat burned. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, bright, chaotic, indifferent. But inside this apartment, Jin felt something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. The baby kicked again, strong, insistent. Jin smiled through his tears. They like you. Tae-Il's lips curved slightly. They have good instincts. 3 months later, Jin stood in the same apartment, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. The baby, his daughter, slept peacefully against his chest, fingers curled into his shirt. Tae-Il sat nearby, watching them with an expression Jin had learned to recognize. Not possession, not obligation, just presence. She's perfect, Tae-Il said quietly. Jin looked up, smiling. She is. The alpha stood, crossing to them. He reached out slowly, letting the baby's tiny hand wrap around his finger. What's her name? Tae-Il asked. Jin hesitated. I was thinking, Hannah. Tae-Il's gaze softened. It suits her. Jin's chest warmed. Outside, the world continued. Chaotic, uncertain, full of challenges they couldn't predict. But inside this space, Jin had something he'd never thought possible. The future. Tae-Il looked at him. The 3 rounds are over. Jin nodded. I know. So what happens next? Jin smiled. Small, genuine, hopeful. Round 4, he said softly. We figure it out together. Tae-Il's expression shifted. Something warm, something real. Together, he agreed. And for the first time in years, Jean believed it. The first challenge came 6 weeks after Hannah was born. Jean was in the nursery, gently rocking his daughter back to sleep after a feeding, when he heard voices in the living room. Not raised, Tae-Il never raised his voice, but tense. Controlled in a way that made Jin's instincts prickle. He settled Hannah in her crib and moved quietly to the doorway. 3 men stood in the living room, all dressed in expensive suits. Alphas, every one of them, carrying themselves with the kind of authority that came from inherited power rather than earned respect. The one in the center, older, silver-haired, with cold eyes, spoke first. "Chairman Kang, we need to discuss your recent entanglement." Tae-Il stood near the window, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "There's nothing to discuss." "On the contrary," the silver-haired alpha continued, "your protection of an unclaimed Omega with a child of questionable origin reflects poorly on the Kang Group's reputation." Jin's stomach twisted. "The board has concerns," another man added, "about your judgment, about potential liabilities." Tae-Il's gaze didn't waver. "The board's concerns are noted and dismissed." The third alpha stepped forward. "Chairman, be reasonable. This Omega gene, he's damaged goods. Everyone knows what Park Min-jae said about him. The pregnancy, the manipulation. Park Min-jae is bankrupt and disgraced." Tae-Il interrupted, voice dangerously quiet. "Anyone who repeats his lies will join him." The silver-haired alpha's expression hardened. "We're not your enemies, Tae-Il. We're trying to protect you. By asking me to abandon someone under my protection?" Tae-Il's jaw tightened. "That's not protection. That's cowardice." "It's strategy," the man corrected. "You've built an empire on control and precision. This," he gestured vaguely toward the nursery, "is neither." Jin's hands curled into fists. Tae-Il moved then, not quickly but with purpose. He crossed the room until he stood directly in front of the silver-haired alpha. "Let me be clear," Tae-Il said softly. "Jean and his daughter are not liabilities. They're not strategies. They're not negotiable." He paused. "And anyone who suggests otherwise can find new employment." The room went silent. The silver-haired alpha's eyes narrowed. "You're willing to risk everything for an Omega you've known less than 6 months?" "Yes," Tae-Il said simply. The tension crackled. Finally, the alpha stepped back. "This isn't over, Chairman. The board will want answers." "Then tell them to ask me directly," Tae-Il said, "and to bring better arguments." The 3 men left without another word. The door closed. Tae-Il stood motionless for a long moment, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. Jean stepped into the living room. "Tae-Il?" The alpha turned, expression softening fractionally when he saw Jean. "You heard most of it," Jean admitted quietly. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," Tae-Il said. "This isn't your fault." Jean wrapped his arms around himself. "They're right, though. I am a liability. I'm—" "Stop," Tae-Il interrupted, crossing to him. "You're not a liability. You're a target." He paused. "There's a difference." Jin's throat tightened. "Why are they doing this?" "Because power doesn't like change," Tae-Il said. "And you represent change. An Omega who refused to disappear. A child who shouldn't exist but does." His gaze held Jin's. "You threaten the system that allowed Park Min-jae to destroy you in the first place." Jin's chest ached. "Then maybe I should. If you suggest leaving, I'll be offended," Tae-Il said evenly. Jean looked up, meeting the alpha's gaze. "You're staying," Tae-Il continued. "We're figuring this out. Together." His expression softened. "That was the deal, remember?" Jin's vision blurred. Round 4. Round 4, Tae-Il agreed. The threats escalated over the next week. Anonymous messages, social media posts questioning Jin's past, whispers at the Kang Group offices, a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to isolate Tae-Il and force him to choose between his position and his protection of Jean. Jin watched it unfold from the apartment, feeling more trapped than he had in his old place. At least then, he'd been invisible. Now, he was hyper-visible, and every eye felt like a weapon. "They're winning," Jin said one evening, staring at his phone. Tae-Il sat beside him, reading through legal documents. "No, they're not." "Tae-Il, look at this." Jin showed him the latest post, a photo of Jin at the grocery store, captioned with cruel speculation about Hannah's paternity. "It's everywhere." Tae-Il took the phone, jaw tightening as he read. Then he set it aside. "Let me ask you something." Jin waited. "Do you regret staying?" Tae-Il asked quietly. Jin's breath caught. "What? If you could go back, if you could undo everything from the moment you sent that text, would you?" Jin stared at him, throat tight. He thought about the past 6 months, the fear, the exposure, the constant feeling of being watched, judged, dissected. But he also thought about the safety, the food, the medical care, the way Tae-Il showed up every single time Jin needed him, without hesitation, without judgment, without conditions beyond the 3 they'd agreed to. And he thought about Hannah, sleeping peacefully in the next room, healthy and safe. "No," Jin whispered. "I wouldn't undo it." Tae-Il's expression softened. "Then we keep going. But what if they don't stop?" Jin asked. "They won't," Tae-Il said. "Not until we give them something bigger to focus on." Jin frowned. "Like what?" Tae-Il stood, crossing to his desk. He pulled out a folder and handed it to Jin. Jin opened it slowly. Inside were documents, financial records, email threads, photographs, evidence of corruption within the Kang Group board, embezzlement, fraud, connections to Park Min-jae's family. Jin's eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" "I've been investigating since the first threat," Tae-Il said. "The men who came here, they're not protecting the company. They're protecting themselves." Jin's hands shook. "If you release this, they'll be destroyed," Tae-Il finished. "Completely." Jin looked up. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because this isn't just my fight anymore," Tae-Il said. "It's ours." He paused. "And I need to know you're ready for what comes next." Jin's chest tightened. "What comes next?" Tae-Il's gaze held his. "We burn it all down and rebuild from the ashes." The board meeting was scheduled for Monday. Jin spent the weekend in a state of controlled panic, oscillating between determination and terror. Sunday night, he couldn't sleep. He found Tae-Il in the living room, working through documents by lamplight. "You should be resting," Tae-Il said without looking up. "So should you," Jin countered, sitting on the couch. Tae-Il set down his pen. "Can't. Too much to prepare." Jin was quiet for a moment. "Are you scared?" Tae-Il looked at him. "Of the board?" "No." "Then what?" Tae-Il's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering beneath the control. "Of failing you." Jin's breath caught. "I brought you into this," Tae-Il continued quietly. "I made you visible. I made you a target." He paused. "If tomorrow doesn't work, it will," Jin interrupted. Tae-Il's gaze searched his face. "You don't know that." "Neither do you," Jin said. "But I trust you." He swallowed hard. "And that has to be enough." Tae-Il was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Get some sleep, Jin." Jin stood, but paused at the hallway. "Tae-Il?" "Yes." "Thank you for not giving up on me." Tae-Il's expression softened. "I never will." Jin's chest ached in the best way possible. He returned to the bedroom, checked on Hannah, and finally, slept. The boardroom was silent. 15 executives sat around the long table, all eyes fixed on Chairman Kang at the head. Jin stood near the door, heart pounding, hands clasped tightly in front of him. Tae-Il had insisted he be present. "They need to see you," he'd said that morning. "They need to understand what they're really attacking." The silver-haired alpha, Director Shin, spoke first. "Chairman Kang, we've called this emergency meeting to address your increasingly erratic behavior. Your protection of an unclaimed Omega has compromised this company's reputation and stability. Tae-Il's expression remained neutral. Noted. Director Shin's jaw tightened. We're asking you to step back from this entanglement for the good of the company. No, Tae-Il said simply. Murmurs rippled around the table. Another director leaned forward. Chairman, be reasonable. We're not asking you to abandon him completely. Just create distance. Let the situation fade from public attention. Distance, Tae-Il repeated. You want me to pretend Jin doesn't exist? To make him invisible again? He paused. Is that what you're asking? We're asking you to prioritize the company, Director Shin said coldly. Tae-Il stood slowly. Then let me show you what I'm prioritizing. He pressed a button on the remote in his hand. The wall screen illuminated. Financial records appeared. Fraudulent transactions, embezzled funds, connections to offshore accounts. Director Shin's face went pale. 3 members of this board, Tae-Il said calmly, have been systematically stealing from the Kang Group for the past 5 years. They've hidden behind legitimate concerns while funneling millions into personal accounts. He clicked to the next slide. Email threads, conversations about covering up the fraud, plans to discredit anyone who questioned them, including Jin. When Jin's story went public, Tae-Il continued, You saw an opportunity. Create a scandal around me. Force me to choose between my position and my protection of him. He paused. Then, once I was weakened, remove me entirely. The room erupted. This is absurd, Director Shin shouted. You have no proof. I have 5 years of proof, Tae-Il interrupted. Bank statements, email records, testimony from 3 whistleblowers. His gaze swept the room. The only thing I don't have is patience. He clicked to the final slide. Legal documents, arrest warrants. Director Shin, Director Choi, Director Park, Tae-Il said. You're all terminated, effective immediately. Legal proceedings begin tomorrow. Security guards entered the room. Director Shin stood, fury contorting his features. You can't do this. The board will vote, Tae-Il said. But first, let me be clear about something. He turned, gesturing to Jin. Jin's heart stopped. Jin isn't a liability, Tae-Il continued. He's proof that systems can be challenged. That people who've been discarded can survive. That power doesn't have to mean cruelty. His voice dropped. And if protecting him means burning this entire company to the ground and rebuilding it, I will. Silence pressed down on the room. Tae-Il's gaze swept across the remaining board members. Anyone else have concerns? No one spoke. Good, Tae-Il said. Meeting adjourned. The security guards escorted the 3 disgraced directors out. The remaining board members filed out quietly, avoiding eye contact. Finally, only Jin and Tae-Il remained. Jin's legs trembled. He leaned against the wall, breath coming in short gasps. Tae-Il crossed to him. Breathe. You just destroyed 3 powerful men, Jin whispered. I exposed 3 criminals, Tae-Il corrected. There's a difference. Jin looked up, vision blurred. You did that for me. I did that for us, Tae-Il said quietly. And for every person they would have destroyed next. Jin's throat burned. Tae-Il's expression softened. Come on, let's go home. That evening, Jin stood in the nursery watching Hannah sleep. She was perfect. Tiny fists curled against her chest, lips slightly parted, completely at peace. Jin heard footsteps behind him. Tae-Il appeared in the doorway, jacket discarded, tie loosened. He looked exhausted but content. She's beautiful, Tae-Il said quietly. Jin smiled. She is. They stood in comfortable silence. Finally, Jin spoke. What happens now? The company restructures, Tae-Il said. The corruption gets cleaned out. We move forward. And us? Jin asked softly. Tae-Il looked at him. What do you want to happen? Jin's chest tightened. I want to stay. I want Hannah to grow up here. He swallowed hard. I want this to be real. It is real, Tae-Il said. But you never claimed me, Jin whispered. You never bonded me. You never. Because those things require consent, Tae-Il interrupted gently. Not protection, not safety, not care. He paused. If you want them, they're yours. But only if you want them. Jin's vision blurred. What if I'm not ready? Then we wait, Tae-Il said simply. However long it takes. Jin's breath shook. Tae-Il stepped closer. Close enough that Jin could feel his warmth, his presence, his absolute certainty. You asked me once why I was doing this, Tae-Il said quietly. The truth is, at first it was obligation, responsibility, doing what was right. Jin's heart pounded. But somewhere along the way, Tae-Il continued, it became something else. His gaze held Jin's. It became choice. Jin's throat closed. I choose you, Tae-Il said. Not because you need me, not because you sent that text, but because you're worth choosing. Tears spilled down Jin's cheeks. And if you choose me back, Tae-Il finished, then we figure out what comes next. Together. Jin closed the distance between them. For the first time, he initiated contact. Reaching up, cupping Tae-Il's face with trembling hands. I choose you, Jin whispered. Tae-Il's expression shifted. Something warm, something profound. He leaned down slowly, giving Jin every opportunity to pull away. Jin didn't. Their lips met, soft, careful, achingly gentle. When they pulled back, Jin was crying. Thank you, he breathed, for seeing me. Tae-Il's thumb brushed away his tears. Always. 3 years later, Jin stood in the kitchen of their new home, larger than the apartment, filled with light and laughter and the chaos of a 3-year-old running through the halls. Hannah shrieked happily as she chased a toy, dark hair flying. Tae-Il caught her mid-run, scooping her up with practiced ease. Easy, little one. You'll hurt yourself. Hannah giggled, wrapping her arms around his neck. Papa, down. Tae-Il set her down gently, and she immediately took off again. Jin watched from the doorway, heart full. Tae-Il crossed to him, pressing a kiss to his temple. She's exhausting. She's perfect, Jin corrected. That too. They stood together, watching their daughter play. Do you ever think about that night? Jin asked quietly. The text. Tae-Il's arm wrapped around his waist. Every day. Jin looked up. Do you regret it? Not even for a second, Tae-Il said. Do you? Jin smiled, genuine, free, unguarded. Never. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, their family thrived. And Jin realized something that made his chest ache in the best way possible. He'd spent years believing he was disposable. That one wrong text, one desperate plea, one moment of vulnerability had been his greatest mistake. But it hadn't been a mistake. It had been the first right choice he'd ever made. Because sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right person. And sometimes 3 rounds aren't the end. They're just the beginning. If you've ever felt like your worth was measured by your mistakes, remember Jin's story. One desperate text. One cold alpha who refused to look away. One choice that changed everything. 3 rounds became 4. 4 became a lifetime. And a mistake became the best thing that ever happened. Your story doesn't end where the world says it should. Sometimes it begins there. Thank you for listening. If the story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not invisible. That they're not disposable. That they're worth choosing. Until next time, stay unbreakable.